What is up, podcast land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Before I talk to my man, Alex Sanfilippo, I just want to first tell everybody where they can hear the podcast. Over the course of the last year or so, it's gone from like 5 or 6 places to pretty much anywhere that you can hear a podcast. Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Pandora, I don't know, wherever else you can think of. That's probably where you're going to find Two Dates and a Dash. All I ask is that if you go and listen to these show, that you hit subscribe, that you click the little download, automatic download for me, because all that does is just helps build my numbers, which gets me a little bit more exposure on the SEO. And, finding me on the internet is literally the key to success. So thank you to everybody who is a fan, and anybody that is going to be a fan. Thank you very much as well for listening. My man, Alex. So it's weird how the world works. So you never know when you're going to have a connection, whether it's through LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, but that's how we met through social media. And he made some introductions to me, some other people, and he's a podcast host. I'm a podcast host. And there was a couple scheduling issues through this whole nightmare that we call Corona. And life is taking over sometimes, but we are here today, finally getting Alex on the show. So without further ado, my man, Alex, how are you?
Matt, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me today. And also, happy birthday to you. I know you're not a big celebrator of your birthday, but happy birthday. As one podcast host to another, I want to say that it shows a level of devotion to your audience that you would still work on your birthday, make a podcast for your people. So I appreciate that, and just wanted to say happy birthday real quick.
Well, thank you, man. I'm 49 now, and on the cusp of a half a century. And I always tell my wife hates this, but I tell the story. So I've had a reoccurring dream since I was in my teens that I die when I'm 53. And,
wow.
And it's never really, the dream never shows me how I die, but it's the overlying, I'm dead and people are at my funeral, and it's not scary to me. It's not something that I worry about, but it is kind of a motivator for me as to why, when people ask me why I work 100 hours a week for the last 12 years, it's not because I enjoy working 100 hours a week. It's because I'm trying to get as much as I can in. If for some reason there's any validity to the 53 number, I want to make sure I'm getting it all done, right? So there's a little bit of motivation there. But I also don't dwell on my birthday. So I don't really spend a lot of time celebrating. Off the air, we talked about my one and only birthday party, other than my 30th, which was bad. My wife threw me a 30th birthday party.
Oh man,
food poisoning, and it was bad. But so I don't celebrate, because both of those, the 6th birthday, which my mom got me, for anybody who's as old as me, my mom bought me a peach dragon cake. So if anybody remembers the early Disney movie Peach Dragon, based off like Puff the Magic Dragon, it was that whole era. It was a horrible cake. It had anise in it, and had like the whole licorice taste, and it was just bad. And the kids at the party didn't like it, so it was a really bad party. My mom tried hard, but it was a really bad party. And then I got, 24 years later, I got out food poisoning from some shellfish we had for dinner. So I don't have parties anymore.
Two Dates and a Dash audience, do never throw Matt a birthday party, because
please,
especially on his 53rd birthday. All right, let's not do it on his 53rd birthday.
54, we may throw one just to celebrate passing. And then a funny part. So how Facebook has those games you can play, and it'll say, what's your spirit animal, or what does your name mean? Well, they did one that says, how and when will you die? It was like this weird thing, and I clicked on it, and it had some kind of like a traumatic event, but I was dying at 57. So if my dream's right, I'm done at 53. If Facebook's right, I'm done at 57. So I get an extra 4 years to finish building my legacy. But
I'm not a doctor. I don't mean to be morbid here, but I guarantee you that you will die at one point in your life. So
that is a fact.
So yes, it is.
That is 100%.
Sorry, audience.
And this is, we're going way off, but fuck it. So I spend, now that I'm 50% less busy, so I own a fitness business, and I have clients, and I work with people with neurological, neuromuscular diseases for rehab. And so I spend 50 hours a week as a cop full time. And then the rest of the time I spend building my gym business, and then our equipment manufacturing side. So those are both shut down because of this COVID-19 nonsense. So I spent the last, 4 weeks 3.5 weeks, spending about 6 hours a day researching cause and effects for this coronavirus. I've been down every
Oh, wow.
conspiracy theory rabbit hole.
Oh, so you're the guy I
I'm
need to
going
talk
for all
to.
of them.
Wow. Okay.
So because I like to solve problems, that's literally my life is solving problems. So I'm looking at it, and there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unprecedented things are happening in our country and around the world. And when you look at the numbers, and it's not that I'm some mathematician, but I do, math is part of science, and there is some logic behind numbers that can give you some sort of an understanding as to what's actually happening. And I have a belief on what's actually going on, and I've researched living shit out of this. But I can promise everybody this is going to pass. That this isn't going to be. We're not the end of days. We're not, what's the Will Smith movie when the aliens were coming and they had to fly out and blow up the alien ship? None of that's happening. This is all going to pass, and if everything works out the way I'm sort of figuring out it's going to work out, it's going to be ending sooner rather than later. And I made a prediction that the third week of April was going to be the tipping point when we start to see the shift, and I predicted that in February, that there's really this shelf life for all of this, and whether or not it's as bad as the experts thought it was, or not nearly as bad as what I believe it is. At the end of the day, it's all going to get back to normal at some point in time. So for anybody that's having pandemic depression or anxiety or being too much time around your family that you're not used to having, I can promise you that it's coming to an end. And there'll be some changes in our world and our society that, whether they're convenient or inconvenient. And, I look at it like 9/11. I was a cop at 9/11. I became a United States Air Marshal a couple months after 9/11, flying around on planes, fighting terrorism as a result of that. But things changed after 9/11. But ultimately, they changed, and then they weren't necessarily a change anymore. You used to be able to walk up to the gate when you were going to meet somebody for a flight. There was no security checkpoints. There was none of that. After 9/11, there was. And then you sort of just realize that makes sense, and we're going to do that. And it's not a problem anymore. It's just part of life.
Yeah. You know what I've actually noticed about this whole pandemic we're in, as we're calling it, is that it's forced a lot of us into the future. As a whole, I think the world is being forced into things like remoting and relying more on, okay, how can we actually still get the same amount of things done, but in a different way than we used to? And that side of it, again, I'm not like excited about what we're going through, but the exciting side is seeing, okay, this is like a glimpse into what the future, what we're going to look like. And Matt, like you're saying, it'll become the new norm at some point, and then we just won't even notice it. But some of the things that are changing right now are for the better, really.
Yeah. And I think there's with any problem, whether it's a physical problem, emotional problem, or a global problem, there's always a catalyst. And the catalyst is the unknown right now. And that's the part I've been researching. And what is the true reason behind why the world has shut down? What is the cause and effect of social distancing and staying home and economic hardship? Why was that the natural course that this took versus any other H1N1, SARS, MERS, you name it? Why was this the thing that caused that versus the others? And there's a whole lot of nuggets of information that are out there that I'm piecing together, and I've been writing my my Matt Cubbler COVID-19 manifesto. And
man, I can't wait to read that though, really, because I mean, I've been wondering the same thing. I mean, I just don't know. I haven't done near the research that you've done. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts whenever you're ready to share those.
Yeah, I'm going to wait till the potential cause and effect of me putting it out there could be minimized to the people that may or may not be handling this component of it well. There are plenty of people, and I'm not sure exactly how you react to stress and things like that. But I've spent the last 49 years essentially in a stress environment, and whether it's growing up the way I grew up, or my time in the military, or being a cop for almost 30 years, I literally am in a reactionary business. So I'm never in the weeds. with this kind of stuff. I'm very clear on everything. I can see things a little bit clearer, but not everybody is. And I
For
respect
sure.
that not everybody handles stress as well as others. And there may be some things that other people that are not handling this well handle perfectly well. And I just shit the bed on. So like, I get that. But
Yep.
and with social media and with a platform of having people who follow you and listen to you and like or comment or whatever, the realities are is you're going to have people who are taking your word as comfort
Hmm.
or as an incendiary device. So you get to choose as the deliverer of the information how you want that to be. And during this period, and I told everybody, I don't care what your opinion is, who you believe is right or wrong, whether Trump's at fault or the Democrats or the liberal media or the deep state or China. At the end, it doesn't matter. The only thing we got to
Hmm.
do is get back to normal. So how do we best get there? What is the easiest and most efficient way to get there? And then once we get to
Exactly.
normal, then you have your conversations.
Right. I'm with you. I love that perspective on it. I think it's great that you're also realizing what the power of social media. I mean, your words have power, and some people don't think they do when you're just typing into typing it on a screen, right? So you don't think it has the same weight and power, but people are relying on that. And people look at you, Matt, as someone who staying strong during stressful situations or uncertainty. People will want to see, okay, well, I know that Matt probably isn't freaking out right now. What is he saying? If you're here just bashing all these different people and all these different things that you don't even really know about, that's not helping anybody. The route that you're taking, again, understanding the authority that you have right now and the influence you have, I think that's the way to handle this. That's how we help each other get through this situation.
And it's sometimes difficult because I have friends that are on either side of panic, right?
Right.
Some are
Me too.
completely, this is a bunch of bullshit, and some people like the
Right.
world is ending and the sky's falling and we're fucked. But then there's this middle ground that is probably more closer to real, but you have to get the outliers to sort of come back onto the road and get there.
Exactly.
And I tell people, I don't, there's people that are like, I need you to put this out, and it's more of a panic alert. And I'm like, that's not me though. Like,
Hmm.
even if I agreed with you, I couldn't put that out there in that way because nobody's looking to me to be that person. Like, so if I throw up the red flag, people are like, holy shit, the world is actually ending. Like, we've got to, everybody buy toilet paper. No.
Not guns, toilet paper, because that's our first
Right.
reaction
Because
for some
that's
reason.
literally going to
So,
save the planet.
apparently.
Not the fact we're killing trees to get the toilet paper. Let's forget about all that.
That's a side note right now. It doesn't matter right now, Matt.
Right. All right. So, I asked one question, and I know you've listened to the show, doing your research, and I truly appreciate that. And the one question I ask is the same for everybody, except I just changed the name. So the question I ask you is, who is Alex Sanfilippo?
First off, I absolutely love the question. The first time I listened to your podcast and heard you ask that question, I was like, whoa, starting with a bomb of a question. I've never been asked that on a podcast before, and I have been on, I've lost count at this point how many podcasts I've been a guest on. No one has ever asked me who was Alex Sanfilippo. So I'm excited to get into that. The first thing I would say is that I believe the only thing that any of us truly own is our own name. Is what people say about you, is what you believe about yourself. It all starts with us. So when I talk about who is Alex Sanfilippo, that is truly the only thing that I own. That's my identity ultimately. So I'll list a few things, and I'd love to just get into conversation about whatever seems interesting to you in the audience. But first and foremost, I'm a follower of Jesus. That's who I believe in. I do my best to mimic his life because I believe that he lived a life of service, and that's what I want to live as well. Second to that, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a friend, I'm a brother. And then ultimately, I'm a person of value. I seek to add value to other people's lives. And simply put, that's my answer to your question there.
Well, I love that. And it is, and the reason it's a broad question is because I may do research on you, and I may look up your creating a brand website and look what you write and look what other people write, look at your social media, look at podcasts you've been on, and I can come up with my own interpretation of who I think you are. And I could
Love
put
that.
that out there, but it may not be who you truly believe you are. And I think when someone asked me, who am I? I was asked that question, and it wasn't in that broad. It was like, what is one word that best describes you?
Hmm.
And for me, it's servant. That's always been
I love that.
my word. And that has a global look, and it has a very micro look. So it's got depth and definition. But when I ask somebody, who are they? Because some people are like, I'm a six-figure earner, I'm a whatever, everybody's got their own
Right. Yeah.
interpretation on whatever is the most important thing in their life.
Hmm.
And you name things that are definitive. Like they're not a fluctuating thing. Like your income will change. Your,
Absolutely.
you
Yep.
know, those things will, but being a son, being a friend, being a follower of Jesus, all those things are definitive and they don't have change. They are
Yeah.
who you are. And I love that answer. So let's start with, and I love talking about faith because faith is a personal journey that
Mhm.
is shared communally, but it's also very individualized. And
Yeah.
you know, I'm the son of a pastor, and you wouldn't know by my language, but and I'll be honest, my dad's dropped the F-bomb several times, so it's not, you're not immune because you wear the collar,
Right. Not from stage though, right?
right? Yeah, he's not on the pulpit having
Okay.
that conversation, um, but it's for me it's my fallback. It's the thing that I, no matter what else is going around me, that I kind of have complete trust in the fact that I believe in Jesus and I believe in God and I believe in Christianity and
Mhm.
everything that comes with it. And if you haven't read this book yet, and I highly recommend you do, buddy of mine, Danny Bader, who I had on the show, who has an amazing story. He was electrocuted, died, went to heaven, met God, and came back.
Oh, I actually heard that episode. That was
Yeah.
phenomenal.
So he's amazing. But he wrote a book called I Met Jesus for a Miller Lite. And it's not a difficult book. It's not the craziest detailed book, but it is the most poignant book I've ever read, even better than the one I wrote, because it changed my perspective on one important trait of faith. There's a difference between hope and trust. I
Wow.
hope something happens, but I don't necessarily know if it's going to happen. When you trust in something, you know it's real. You know it's there. It's going to happen. I trust that Jesus died for our sins. I trust that there's a place after this where I go and I meet him again. Like, I believe in all those things. That's trust. And there's a difference between hope and trust. And when you can get somebody to, in anything, in like whether it's tangible, real, or eternal in faith, when you can have somebody shift their focus from hoping something is going to happen to trusting something is going to happen, that is a game changer. And that's what I got from that book, is I shifted my focus from hope to trust. And it was like a
Mhm.
truly life-changing moment because it made so much sense to me on the commitment level, on my own personal commitment to whatever it is I'm hoping and trusting for, that if I just shift that, just a tiny shift,
Yeah.
trust becomes the thing that stands out.
I love that. I think, man, that's for me, that's what it comes down to as well. You know, I need to go pick up a copy of that book. Obviously, that sounds awesome. But for me, it was my early 20s is when I decided I needed a shift, because if you would have had me on in my early 20s, so let's just say 11 years ago, you would have had me on this show, my conversation with you would be very different. I would have told you that I'm one of the youngest people in real estate right now. I own real estate. I have rental properties. You know, I would have told you how much I was making at the time, which I don't even remember what it was now. But I would have told you all those things about myself at that point. And we hit 2006, 2007, whenever the whole thing crashed, you know, and I lost a lot of money as a 19, 20-year-old kid at that point, you know. And at that point, I realized there was something something that needed to be more than me. Like, I needed more to mean, like, to be Alex Sanfilippo. There needed to be something deeper than that, because I lived a life of, well, I hope I make it, you know, most successful under 30. And, you know, like, and I hope I have enough money to pay off my own place sometime soon. I hope I can get that nice sports car. And that's kind of the hope that I had, if you will. And I didn't have any faith in anything. There wasn't any deep trust really happening in my life at all. And that's the time when I don't even know why. I got like a flyer in the mail, because that used to be a thing. Like, physically, a copy came and like invited me to some young adults thing at a church. And it was like walking distance from where I lived. I was like, oh, I guess I'll go check that out and see what it's all about. Maybe I'll meet somebody there. Might be cool. So,
Well, let me ask you
and
this. I'm going to interrupt you
yeah,
real quick.
go ahead.
Because human behavior is a really key component to decision making, right? So, and you were in a time where you were probably in a deflated emotional state.
Yes.
So when you, and there's no right answer to this, but when you saw that flyer and you said, hey, maybe I'll meet somebody. And the only reason I say this is because there's so many networking events.
Mm-hmm.
And as entrepreneurs and business people and marketers or anything in that realm, you go to these things, not necessarily because of the meaning behind the organization that's holding it, but for
Right.
the opportunity that could potentially have for your business. So my question is when you saw that young adult Christian-based networking event essentially at this church, what
Right.
was your first thought?
Yeah, I'm really glad you stopped me there, because my first thought really was, who could I meet here? But it wasn't like, oh, maybe there's somebody that I could do some business with. It was more so like, could somebody help me here?
Perfect.
And I didn't know, like, so again, thank you for stopping me there. It's so important. I didn't know if it was going to be a person. I didn't know if it was going to be Jesus. I didn't even know what that stuff meant at that point. I just knew that, like, okay, there's supposedly something different with this group of people than these normal networking events I'd go to on a Wednesday night. So I'm going to go here instead and see who I can actually meet, who can actually do something for me. And the rest is history. We can go on that story forever, but like, it was probably the second week I went back, I met some people that really just, they cared about me. Like, people actually cared about me, and they knew that, like, I was in real estate. Like, oh, you must not be doing very well. Like, do you need anything? I'm like, whoa, who are these people? Everyone else is wondering, like, oh, how much money did you lose? Like, they're actually asking me, can I help you with something? And shortly after, these people helped introduce me to Jesus, and ever since then, I've been a sold out follower. And now my faith, my trust, my hope is in this person, who's Jesus, instead of just the things and the possessions of this world, and just saying, oh well, we'll see what happens one day. Instead, now, like, even like COVID-19 scares a lot of people. It doesn't scare me at all, because I know who I belong to. I know the future that I have, whether it's in this life or the next, and there's no reason for me to have any additional worry past that. So I went kind of deep right there, but man, that's the number one thing. That who is Alex Sanfilippo? A follower of Jesus, and I just really lay that all out there for you.
I love that. And it's as simple as a flyer. It really can be, like, not necessarily, go become a Christian or whatever, but just sometimes the life-changing moment can be something as simple as something that you probably would have thrown away. Like, I throw away more
So true.
junk mail on a day
Right.
that may have value, but I don't even acknowledge it exists to give
Yeah.
it time to open it up, to look at and see what's in there, whether it's Clipper magazines or coupon books, whatever, because I don't have any interest. And but something made you stop
Yes.
and look and go, because it wasn't like you've been sitting around soul searching going,
No,
what
not
is
at all.
missing? And like this whole, I need a sign. Like, so you weren't, because that's what happens a lot. People are waiting for something to happen to show them what to do to get out of whatever they're in that they're not happy with.
Yep.
But you weren't looking for that. You were just simply, I guess I'll check that out. And then the shift was, and this is a really important key in just life. There are people that provide and people that take, right? I raised my kids to be providers, to be people that go out and give of themselves to their world, that whatever their world is, be the most abundantly giving person, and don't ask or take from anything. If somebody wants to give back, that's a whole different conversation. But
Mm-hmm.
when you take from society or take from your network of friends or your family, there's a whole different mindset when someone says to me, how can I help you? And you can tell when you have in your life in real estate and business, you get to have a lot of interactions, and you
Right.
can tell when somebody is being genuine and truly wants to help you. And then there's somebody that, what can I do to help you? Because it's a line they learned from some class they took from
Right. Yeah.
some business coach that's saying, hey, how you really get them is when you
You
ask
can
them for your
always
help.
tell the difference, though. You really can always tell the difference. I can tell if you're asking me because you like genuinely want to help, or if it's more like, okay, they're asking me this so they can sell me this afterwards. Like, you can almost see the response lining up. So you can definitely
You're
tell the
watching
difference.
their brains going,
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that one out, and then, okay, my next 4 questions are,
Yeah.
yeah, like you just see it. It's like this twisted
Oh man, it's
mental
sad.
judo they're trying to put on you, right?
It doesn't work.
No, but it's constant in the world that we live in. There's charlatans in everything we do. There are
Hmm.
disingenuous people who aren't really interested in helping or providing or giving. They just simply want to accumulate as
Yeah.
much as possible. And how do I get as much from you and you and you and you and you as I can possibly get, so I can amass my whatever.
Yeah.
It's this twisted world that we live in. And quite frankly, it's during times like this that we're in right now where you see and I put a post up the other day, and it was kind of offensive, but it was, everything I put up is intentional. I don't ever haphazardly write. I've written and deleted more posts in my life than I've ever actually posted,
That's
because
good. That's smart. There's a lesson there.
And this is my one trick for everybody. Get a Fitbit. If your heart rate elevates as you're typing,
There it is. That's it.
then you don't
post it.
You don't hit send.
That's right.
Right. So, and I literally, I look at my heart rate, and as I'm typing, I'm like, yep, delete. Like, this is getting me way too emotionally involved. But one thing I posted was, through this COVID-19, I'm a cop, so I'm a little bit twisted and a little bit dark on my humor. But I said, what I learned through the first 3 weeks is who's going to be, if they ever had to go to prison, who's going to be the bitch and who's going to run the yard. Like, I know, I can tell by everybody's posts who is where. And it's not until you see times like this where you see people's reaction to adverse conditions come out. And in life, if you had the ability to sit back and watch during a pandemic when everybody's going through the same thing and seeing how people react, if you had that same ability to read situations in everyday life when everything's normal, dude, you're Superman.
Right. Yeah, you're not kidding.
Because people are hitting send without thinking. And it's the emotional response. And all of a sudden you're like, well, he's in the weeds. Like, you see that.
Yeah. The emotional responses right now, they're dangerous. It's a really dangerous thing to ever respond emotionally. You think about any business, what successful business ever responds from an emotional standpoint, like that. It's all logic. It's all based off of something that's calculated. It's a decision that you made instead of being in that moment. I love that you use your Fitbit to tell you when you should post or not post something. And there's been times like at work, I work in the aerospace industry now, is what I'm in full time, that I've had some suppliers do some really rough things. And I've written up some emails, but if my heart rate is elevated, I'll walk away. I'll be like, Alex, come back in 10 minutes and reread it. And usually I'll read it and be like, what were you going to say? Like, Alex, that's terrible. Like I delete it and start over and be like, oh, thank you. Can you help us with this? Like,
you don't have the nuke switch.
Yeah. Right. I think that we should somehow get a Fitbit that attaches to like Facebook and won't allow you to post until your heart rate reaches like a certain low level. It's like, okay, you can post now.
I used to be a habitual nuke switch guy. Like, I would nuke bridges and knowing I'm nuking it. Like, I'm just like, done, you're dead to me. And I am the biggest, and probably still am on some level, the biggest grudge holding son of a bitch there is.
You can be delivered from that.
and I'm very, but I have a really demarcation line where I'll forgive or not forgive. Like, there's certain, you can't come back from this type stuff. And I hold those until I die. I know I will. And even though I try to work through that and offer forgiveness, in reality, I haven't forgiven shit. I'm just trying to be a better man or the bigger man from it all. Right. But I think in the world we live in today where, when I was growing up, I didn't know if the Phillies won against the Dodgers when they were playing on the West Coast until the midday midday newspaper the next day. Right? You didn't know, but now everything's instantaneous.
Right.
And I think from my generation, I don't necessarily, I like it, but I also know the danger of instantaneous, especially being a father and raising, I have a 22-year-old and a 17-year-old. So I know how instantaneous gratification works in raising them and what their expectation level are on certain things and how to moderate that and give them some level of temperance and understanding that, life isn't about instant gratification. But we built a society where social media is literally the biggest instant gratification drug there is.
It's terrible.
Because you post your pic or whatever, and then you sit there and wait for the likes. And if you're not getting them, you're like, well, what did I do wrong with that one? Let me try a different one. And it's like this whole mouse game. It's sick.
We've tied too much self-worth to it. Like, way too much of our worth is tied to that. And it's a dangerous place to be. I mean, I fear for your kids are old enough. It's probably doesn't have a huge effect on them, but imagine their kids, like the effect that mentally, if they're allowed to just spend whatever time they want on there, what's that going to do in their minds? I mean, it's scary to think about the future of what social media is going to hold for people. It really is.
One thing you mentioned at the very beginning is your name, right? Who you are. And I think that identity, that ownership of the lineage of your name. You know, whether my biological father was a shithead. I haven't spoken to him in 26 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I carry his name. But I now get to define, because there's people before him that had amazing Cubbler legacies.
Yeah,
Just because one Cubbler in the chain of our family tree shit the bed doesn't mean that the Cubbler name doesn't have value.
for sure.
And for a long time, I didn't have value for that. I had thought about changing my last name to my stepdad's name. Like, I had a lot of thoughts on how do I want to be known and the value of my name until I had my first kid. And then I realized that that name for her is a result of me.
Yeah.
And not what came before. I get to have that knowledge. And when she grows up and becomes an adult, she can begin to understand the history of our family. But for that 10, 12 years of her first of her life, it's because of me.
Yeah.
That name exists. And I think when you said that, it triggered this emotional response to me and the value of the name. And I tell my kids when they walk out of the house, never forget, you have my name. And I've done a lot of work to make sure that the name that you carry provides you opportunity, provides you with respect, provides you with dignity and honor. And it's up to you now to make sure that when you walk out these doors and come back into these doors, that you did your job to maintain that level and someday increase it. What does your name mean to you? Tell us your name and how, because that was literally the first thing you said.
Yeah. I mean, first off, it all, like what you're talking about, it comes down to legacy. Like the legacy that you're leaving, the way that people remember Matt is through that name that they'll continue to drive through generation. And if one person makes a mistake along the way, fine. Someone can always pick that back up. And I'm a firm believer of that. My parents, I'd say that I love my grandparents and even their parents, but they're all refugees. So they came from Italy on my dad's side. My mom's side came from Israel. And they came into extreme poverty. I mean, like 7 people in one room on both sides of the family, which is crazy. My parents were the first one to really like get grounded in the United States and start building a name, start actually building that name. And now it's my honor to continue to carry it. And I acknowledge the fact that, hey, where I came from, how I even got my start was thanks to my parents. And I acknowledge that. So it all kind of comes down to legacy first off for me, but then it's something that you talk about, that you train your kids and that you just believe in, which is to serve people. And for me, I talked about really early on being a person of value, and my name, I wanted to stand by saying that like Alex is a person of value. Sanfilippo is a person of value. And that's like that's the most important thing to me at the end of the day. I used to, like, going back to my early 20s again, I would consider myself a person of profit. Since that time, I've changed from a person of profit to a person of value. All I want to do is help as many people as I possibly can with the skills and natural abilities that I have. And that's how I'm going to use my name to spread goodness in the world. That's what my name means for me.
Now, you're married, right?
Yeah.
And do you have kids yet?
No. Maybe later.
What are your thoughts of, when you talk about legacy? And my brother died when I was 18, and he was autistic and stuttered, and he had, an amazing struggle for his 21 years. But his legacy was that of love and that of purity. And the people, I tell the story all the time, when he died, growing up, not one person ever called our house and said, can Andy come out and play, or invite Andy to a party, or invite Andy to anything. No one ever came in, or he never went anywhere. There was never that like connectivity with other kids. So when you think about his life, you're like, man, it was me and my mom, and later my stepdad, and that was it. And you think about what kind of legacy could he have left? Well, the reality is that every summer he went away for 3 months to work at a camp locally here. It was a Christian camp, and he would cut grass and do odds and ends. He was just like a handyman kind of guy, a groundskeeper. And, but I never went there. So I didn't know anything about that place. I didn't know what his day-to-day was. I just knew that he would leave in June and come home in August, and we'd go see him on the weekends. But he touched more people's lives.
Wow.
In a place where he felt the most safe and the most accepted. That when he died, there was 1,000 people at the church to say goodbye. And I remember thinking, how in God's name are there 1,000 people when I don't remember 10 people ever being a part of our life on that level? And the reality is you don't always know the level of connectivity you have in somebody else's life. They don't always have an opportunity, or maybe they're not comfortable sharing that. But your day to day, the things you do as a giving person, as a person of value, you may not see today. But I'm a firm believer in, and I watched it happen with my brother, that when your last day on earth happens, that's truly the measure of your life. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying somebody that doesn't have a lot of people show up at a funeral didn't live a good life. I'm just saying that when you look at your ability to connect, your ability to enrich someone else's life, that is 100% within your control. And I would venture to bet that if you do that well throughout the course of your life, whether it's until you're 53 or 153, that
Right.
when it's all said and done, there will be a room full of people saying thank you for the life that you lived. And that's what legacy is.
Yeah, you bring up like a handful of different ideas that I want to talk about. But the first thing I'm going to say here is, when I'm doing reflection on my own life, which I do somewhat regularly, I ask myself, Alex, what do you want someone to say about you at your funeral? What will people say about you at your funeral? And really think about that. Where I am right now, what would people say about me? And some people are like, oh, that's kind of a morbid thing. But like, the truth is, like, I want to know, am I living a life in a direction that's going to lead me to where your brother ended up? I mean, clearly he touched a lot of people. And the book that came to mind was actually a book by Andy Andrews, The Butterfly Effect. I mean, the book's like 30 pages. It's so small, but the whole idea is taking that original idea, that the butterfly effect, which is a butterfly flaps its wings on one side of the world, and that makes air molecules move and move and move, and that causes giant storms, even hurricanes on the other side of the planet. That was a theory that was proven. I think for many of us, we just don't think about the small daily actions that we do, something as simple as posting on Facebook. We don't really think about the long-term effect that that's going to have, and the impact it could have on just one life, which in turn could hit 2, 3, 4, 5, and can continue to go. And that's clearly the effect that your brother had on people, was the fact that it might have been 1 or 2 lives he touched initially, and then that continued to grow and grow and grow. And something that I always tell myself, I say, Alex, do for one what you wish you could do for all. I don't have the masses following me. I don't have a huge following anywhere on social media or like a million friends or anything like that. But here's the deal. If I can help impact one life today, then it's got to be worth it, because that's what I wish I could do for every single person alive right now.
That's so true. And I love that butterfly effect analogy. And not to get on a side tangent, but it's almost like this shit we're living in right now with, the social distancing and stop the spread and flatten the curve and all the catchphrases are going out. It's limiting that. It's the opposite of that, with the understanding that the butterfly effect is happening. So we don't, on the negative side, want that to happen. So we're stopping that process from happening. But in reality and that what you said is, do for one what you would do for all. Mm-hmm. I mentor kids, and I love to know that one kid started here and ended here, and the growth that they showed was uncanny. But they now understand how they got there, and their ability to then branch that out to however their network manifests itself of life, that they can do that for others. And that's where that butterfly effect comes into play. Because in a world, we talked about this with social media, in a world where likes and shares become our defining moment in whether or not we're making an impact, the reality is that it just only needs one. You only need one person to be impacted, and that person's going to use whatever those words were, or the deed that you did, to help them, to then help someone else.
Absolutely.
It's man, this is not the way I thought this conversation was going today, which I love.
No, me neither.
Which is why that I love my show, because there's never a plan.
2 dates and a dash, man. We just talk about whatever comes up. It's real life. I love it. I think it's fantastic. Not enough people are doing what you're doing right now. This is a game changer.
It's at least entertaining us for an hour.
True.
It's a blessing to be able to share stories that it's not necessarily. And listen, we've talked about, I've had famous people on the show, and I've had people no one's ever heard of, but I can tell you, and I'll tell one story. So I had one, and this is more in a volume level that I can see the impact it had. A friend of mine I worked with when I was in the Federal Air Marshal Service, he and his wife, they're both federal employees. He was an agent with me, and they lost their daughter to the opioid crisis.
Oh, wow.
And she's not a social media person. She's not she doesn't have a big network of contacts, and she doesn't have the ability to disperse information in great quantities. She doesn't have a YouTube channel or any of that stuff. but I had her on the show, and we shared her story about her daughter and Gabby and the struggle, because you think that two federal agents, one working counterterrorism, whose literally only job is to observe and detect, that they could have seen the signs that were going on in their own life, but sometimes you become nose blind to the smell, right? So
Right.
it's, you
Yep.
don't see what's right in front of you sometimes. And reflecting back on that, and being honest with herself and saying, I really feel horrible that I didn't see the signs. Well, that show was the highest rated show I've ever had, as far
Wow.
as number of views, number of shares, and it was not based on people who are necessarily social media savvy. This was just impacting lives and people sharing it because it resonated. And that's what I love
Yeah.
about the show. It's not necessarily about the name value of the guest or the amount of social media exposure they can provide. It's just simply, how do I share stories that resonate in people's hearts, so that they're willing to say, I know somebody that wants to hear this or needs to hear this. And I think that's what this show is going to do, because we're talking about, you're a business guy, you're a podcast host,
Yeah.
you're a business executive coach, and you're all involved in entrepreneurial stuff. And quite frankly, we haven't talked about any of that.
No, that's great. This is
And
good.
it's not that that's not important, but the way you answered that question was literally, who is Alex Sanfilippo? It's the starter of the show, and
Yeah.
it's taken us down a path that I think is, it makes my heart feel good. That, because I don't get, and I told you before the show, I've had a few clunkers
Of course.
as
We all
guests, and
have.
it's not that they're
All
not good
podcast hosts.
people. It's just, it didn't resonate with the people that pay attention to my show.
Right.
And it's always a risk when I go down the entrepreneurial road with people, because you never know with the guests whether or not they have the ability to just answer a question in an honest way, where they took it and said, wow, that's a great question. How do I
Yeah.
really feel about that? Rather than a clickbait or standard answer that is beneficial towards the story that they want to tell on my show. You know what I'm saying? Because you had said in an email, I want to be prepared. How do you want the show to go? What are your directions? I'm like, listen, I'm gonna ask one question. We'll figure the rest out. And,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how it works. So let's talk about how you decided, because, I was a 4.0 guy in high school, and I had
Mhm.
a appointment with the United States Coast Guard Academy, and I threw it all away and enlisted in the Army, and I went down the path I went down. How did
Mhm.
you decide the path you were going to go down? Because you're what, 32, 30, how old are you?
32. Yep.
32.
Yep. 32. Yep.
You've got 14 years since you graduated high school. How did you make the decision to head down the path you were going down?
Yeah, I love that question. Real quick, just going to go back to something you mentioned, which, like your most popular show ever was from people who didn't have social media and things like that. There's a big marketing nugget there that I think a lot of people miss, which is when you're being a podcast host or having anyone collaborate with you in any way, don't look for the person that has the biggest following, the most fans, or any of that type of thing. Look at what's going to add the absolute most value and go after that. And that's something I like about your show. You're not just going after big names. I mean, you got me. No one who's listening to this right now has heard of me, and I'm okay with saying that. That's fine. But you weren't looking for like, okay, he has 4,000 followers here, 8,000 here. Like, you weren't doing that math. You're saying, you know what? I think he's a person of value. Let's have him on and see what he can do. That's always going to go further than you just saying, okay, give me the biggest and the best. And then like, hopefully they'll just share it with everybody. So there's a lot to be said there. And that's just like a little side note there. I'll go
I
back to
like
your
that.
question
Thank
now,
you.
but I think it's important that we talked about that for a minute and the audience hear that, because the world thinks too much about numbers and we put that on a pedestal. And I think it's wrong. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a journey, and someone's journey that is closer to you might even be able to speak more to your current situation than somebody who's light years ahead of it. So
Yeah.
for what it's worth. Anyway, back to your question. What was your question? I went off there.
How did you decide the path you're going to go down? Was it like mine was and I'll just add this, mine was based on fear. And it was the last time I consciously allowed fear to dictate my future. I was a smoke and mirror 4.0. I knew how to manipulate the system of education to get the best grade that I needed for the moment and retain none of it. None of it. I knew how to game the system in order to get the result I was trying to get. And it didn't allow me to truly become more intelligent. It just allowed me to be more skillful in manipulating situations. So
Right.
I knew if I'd have went there, I would have been exposed. And I ended up, when I chose the Army, I thought I'm just going to go in the Army. It's fucking Army, right? How hard's that going to be? Well, I became an intelligence analyst, and I didn't know that my biggest weakness is math and understanding. It was at the time understanding like differential equations and algebra and things that were taking an unknown and trying to create a known value. And what did I do? I became a cryptologist which is literally all about the unknown, right?
You trying to get rid of fear. I think you took the wrong path.
and I didn't think that one through. I'm just like, oh, it's the Army.
You're right.
Right. So I got to Intel school and I almost failed out of the Army. I almost failed out of the fucking Army. Like, how does that happen? Like, that's not normal. And it's because I was so unwilling to open my mind up. I just wanted to find the easiest pathway and not solve the problem. And it wasn't until I had an instructor who pulled me aside. He goes, listen, man, I can tell you are super duper smart. He goes, but you're a fucking idiot. And I'm like,
someone who's real with you right there.
Yes, sir. He's like, you need to spend some time with me after class and we're going to figure out how to unlock what's going on in your brain because there's so much in there that you're not using. And he did. And that was a life-changing moment for me.
Yeah.
So I'm always interested in how people either pick their path or the path was picked for them.
Yeah. I mean, so for me, it's a little bit of both. I'll jump back, like way back. Let's go back to when I was 12. I started selling, or I guess when 12 was probably 9, selling lemonade on the side of the street because that's what kids did. And I did in my head, this is the first time I realized I was actually good at something. As I was sitting there, I thought about the profit margin, which no one ever taught me. I was just like, we're not making very much money by doing this because mom and dad paid for this. I got to pay them back and this and this. Add it all up. And I was like, we got to find a better business to do in the neighborhood here. Anyway, long story short, we ended up selling, me and a couple of the other kids in the neighborhood, my brothers as well. We started collecting used golf balls out of lakes and selling them back to the golfers and made a lot of money for 10 and 12 year olds, and at that point is when I realized, I love business. I didn't really enjoy a lot of other things as a kid that most would. I wasn't really good at other things, but I was good at making money. So by the time I was 16, I started a tech company in the real estate industry. And I was able to build up pretty big. We're making the virtual tours of homes back. We actually came up with the software. We're the ones that invented that 365-degree tour. Wow. Anytime anyone saw those back then, 2003, 4, and 5, we're the ones that came up with that tech. Anyway, I got into real estate investing as soon as I could, as soon as I was 18, because I was like, this is now my path. So I thought I had it all figured out. And then that's when 2006, 2007 hit, which I, maybe a more established real estate investor could have maybe called some of that. I put all my eggs in that basket and I lost all of my eggs from that whole situation. At that point, I guess you could say the world I was in forced me into a different calling in my life or a different direction in my life at that point. And that's when I decided, that's when I got into church and things like that. And at that point, got into aerospace and same thing. I enjoyed business. And ever since then, I've been more entrepreneurial minded. So I've done a lot of coaching and things like that and helping people out. Again, go back to being a person of value. I just want to help someone make that first or next step in business, the right one. And that's kind of where I add the value. And I love it. And now it's become my choice. When I started in aerospace, it was more like I need money because now I have all this debt at my early 20s. I've got to find a way out of this. And then it turned into more, okay, now how can I give back to people that maybe want to try doing something for themselves? And that's the direction I went. And that's kind of the whole journey there. So some of it was in my doing and others wasn't. But the big thing that I always did was able to pivot really well. I was able to keep a positive attitude, mindset, and just continue to roll with the punches as they came. And now I'm doing my best to just help other people make that first or next step, the right one, like I said. So
I find that fascinating because I was, and it's embarrassing, but it's real. I mean, it's part of my life. So I was an entrepreneur when I was younger. I had a small marijuana sales business where I was selling marijuana to pay for the marijuana I was going to smoke later. There wasn't necessarily profit margin requirement for that. I had a term paper writing business, like a book report writing business, where I would not read. And I only read one book from 1985 until 2006 when I published mine.
Whoa.
And it was Animal Farm. It was the only book I ever read front to back. Only because and if you remember, Animal Farm was like the hierarchy of society within the farm, right? And each animal had their own personality. And so I found that fascinating. And I never, I just figured that was probably the best book I was ever going to read anyway, so why read any others? But I started writing papers because I can bullshit better than most people, that I would, to read the first few pages of the first chapter and some stuff, the first and last page of each chapter, and then the dust cover and the front cover, and sort of just kind of figure out what this is about. And then I can write well. And so I was making money on those. And then I stole 2,000 hall passes. And I learned how to forge 4 different teacher signatures, and I would sell them for $1 a piece. And
gosh, you were a genius, maybe a kind of an evil genius, but you're definitely a genius.
The problem was that I got caught in all of them. So it was like they had a really short run. Like none of them really ever turned into anything big. But so yeah, and you were doing like real things, like at least, well, technically you were stealing golf balls, but
they were the lakes, and yes, the neighborhood did technically own them. So
that's funny.
I never thought of it that way.
And now I'm a cop, so it's I guess that's why I became a cop, because I had figured out that I wasn't very good at being a criminal since I got caught at everything I did. So
and now you just catch everybody. So good job.
Yeah, it's a nice transitional component.
For sure.
Let's talk about your podcast. Let's talk about the coaching work you do, and because while we've laid the groundwork for who Alex is, if somebody wants to reach out to you and figure out this guy sounds like a really good dude, how can you bring value to them? Tell them what you do.
Yeah. So the biggest thing I talked about, I mentioned that I love community building. That's my big thing with the way that I help people kind of make that first or next step in business, how I'm a person of value. I found that nothing is more powerful than community in my life. It goes back to that first time I stepped foot in that church when they were really asking me how they could help. That was the first time I was ever in a life-giving community. And ever since that time, I've made it my goal to be a community builder. And I've done that a few times with churches. I've done that outside of church. And for the first time ever with creating a brand, I'm building an online community. And right now that works out really well because none of us can actually be in physical community. We actually just opened it up a couple of weeks ago, but it's been really cool just to try to get people together around this like-minded idea of how can we help one another. So we actually took it off big social media platforms. We use a third-party network called Mighty Networks, and we built it all on that platform. The whole idea is, again, collaboration. How can we help each other? How can we encourage one another? What can we do to add value? And thus far, we're just a few weeks in out of beta, and it's been really fun. So for me, the whole way I kind of get people to even start working with me, I don't charge for any of this. I just bring them in for free, and I'll see if I can help there. And if anyone's like, hey, I really, I want to sit down with you and go over this for the next few weeks, that's when I'll really sit down and be like, okay, let's look at how we can do that. And the majority of the time, I'm actually going to push people to my online courses first, which I do communicate back and forth with people. But again, I'm not I want to be that person of value. So I want to make sure that, hey, if you really think you want to work with me, fine, but let's make sure you want to get to that point first. So I try to give as much away as I possibly can before I get to that point. And a lot of marketing people don't really agree with the way I do this, but hey, I mean, that's what I believe in at the end of the day. So everything I do is at creatingabrand.com. There's just a few pages there. You can find the podcast, which I consider to be more of a masterclass. We'll cover something that's an entrepreneurial topic and really dive deep into that topic. So they're, 20, 30 minutes, and it's really focused. There's nothing like this. That's why I'm having an absolute blast today, because I don't ever get to do anything like this. This is fun. But yeah, it's really like, okay, there's a topic I want to dive into. You can find it there. And that's really what I do. It's all at creatingabrand.com, just a few pages in the communities there as well. But again, I'm just there to add value. And me just having a background in business entrepreneurship, I find that people I'm helping are those people that are really just kind of early on, maybe struggling with the idea, trying to figure out how to get it, going. And if I can't help with that, at least hopefully someone in my network can help, and I can point you in the right direction if that makes sense to you.
No, there's, I've backed off my speaking a lot.
Right now, you're completely off of it.
and I'm probably going to be off of it until there's a reason for me to speak, and sort of tying into what you're doing. I found that in the speaker world, that unless you're like, I'm a one-trick pony speaker. I share my brother's story, and that's the only thing I want to talk about. Like, I can have conversations on counterterrorism, on firearms, on personal defense, on all kinds of things. I just don't give a shit enough about it to talk about it. Like, it's just not, I do it every day. I don't want to talk about it. And I don't want to be in I've already cussed enough. So whose dick's bigger competition with all the other guys who are out there doing the same thing. That's just not, I have no interest in competing for market space. Like, I'm just not, because I'm not passionate about it. If it was something I was passionate about, then I would probably push that a little bit harder, but I just want to tell one story. And I found that the only way that I can be, I don't always want to be a cop. I want to get out of this. And, I have my manufacturing company, and that's taken off, and that's doing great. And I love that. That's my passion. And I only have, time is the biggest commodity that we all have. And where do you allocate? And I realized that I was fighting a lot of time constraint issues by trying to ram my one topic of conversation into a platform that is not necessarily going to be able to sustain itself at a level that would allow me to create more time. So ultimately, that's all decisions I make are based on, is it helping me or hurting me? And while sharing my brother's story helps me, it's hurting me because it's taking away time that I could be spending on things that I can create my exit strategy out of police work, because it is running its course. And having the next step of that is important to me. And just for the legacy of what I'm going to leave behind to my kids. And, God forbid something happens to me at 53. What does my wife end up with? It's like all these things come into my decision-making. But as you are working with people, are people coming to you with time constraint issues? Like, how do I spend my time?
All the time. I mean, that's the number one thing I'm getting. I'm glad you realize, I mean, time is our greatest commodity. I think about a neighbor that I had. He actually, right now I live in a condo, which is funny. It's one of my old investments. I actually moved into it when I lost a lot of money. So here I am. Ended up loving it. But the guy who built this complex and like 5 others in our same city here, he has them everywhere, worth well into 9 figures. He passed away 2 years ago, and he's somebody I always knew because he was in the neighborhood. He liked living in the neighborhood, which is kind of funny, but that's a whole other story. But anyway, I've had conversations with over the years, and towards the end of his life, when he was getting really sick, I had a conversation with him about it. And he's like, you know what? If there's one thing I could change, he goes, I don't even care about the money or the cars or the women anymore. He goes, all I care about is my health. He's like, if I could just somehow have more time or go back and use my time better, I would be so much happier right now with my life. This is a guy that, like, to maybe most people that would listen to this would say, oh my gosh, he literally had everything. I mean, he had all the cars you could imagine, all the money you could imagine. But at the end of his life, he was still saying, I wish I used my time differently. That says something. I mean, it really does. And that's the number one thing people tell me. They're always like, I just don't have time to do this. Or, I want to make this happen, but I don't have time. And the truth is, I found, because I used to be the guy with that excuse as well, is that we all have more time than we're willing to admit. All of us have more time than we're willing to admit. We all have 24 hours in a day, but it's amazing how some people can do so much with that and others can't. And I get some of us, I have a full-time job, and creating a brand is my side hustle. I do both. And people are always asking me, how on earth do you do that? And the truth is, I just got really intentional with my productivity. And I still have fun. I still go with friends. I still hang out with my wife. Both parties there would say that I'm still very present in their lives. And I like that. But when I'm working, I'm focused, which means I don't have my phone sitting next to me. I'm not scrolling through social media while I'm working. Or when I'm supposed to be working, I'm not also watching Netflix in the background, or I'm not running in and out. I use my time so efficiently that it makes it look like I have more than other people. And I'll tell you what, since I started doing this, I have an online course for it. It's called Daily 3x7, Unleashing Your Full Potential. Ever since I started doing this, what I call my Daily 3x7, I have lived a more fulfilled, purpose-driven life than I ever had before. And I'm the happiest and healthiest I've ever been, just from really being mindful of my time and my productivity.
Yeah, it's, I don't know if, and I have a lot of friends that I've known throughout the years, some I grew up with, some from the military, law enforcement, and then just generally people I know in the community, that not everybody is as intentional with their life as they could be. Mm-hmm. Whether it's, there's, as a cop, I see nobody calls the police when they're happy, right? So nobody's calling to say, hey, just wanted you to come by so I can give you a high five. Like, there's always a problem. So I see the byproduct of problems, and a lot of those problems come from the simple act of decision making on an intentional level, whether it's about stuff that you're doing, or as a parent, how am I raising my children? What are my tenets that I'm trying to instill in them? How intentional am I in what people see from me? Mm-hmm. Like, I try to be as real as I can in all things that I do. I don't have a fake persona. I cuss a lot. I tell the truth. I don't try to ever hurt anyone. But it's intentional. I'm very cognizant of the 360. It's almost like you're creating that 360 virtual tour. Yeah. But like when somebody can see it, it's such a weird transition, because that's not where I was going with this. But when you look at a house picture, and it just made me think about staging, right? When people sell a house, they stage the house to look at its best. It doesn't show the 360 it'll just show the angle that they want to show that may not show the water stain that they're standing on top of
Right.
on the floor, right? So when you think
Yeah.
about life is about, in a lot of senses, staging. What do I want people to see from me? And it's the social media problem where people, I know them personally, and what they're putting out on Facebook, I know for a fact is not who they are. And
Mm-hmm.
and it's that staging of your life for public consumption so that you get the feeling that everybody wants to be you or likes you. And I think being able to coach somebody, whether for me it's kids, for you it's probably more the entrepreneurs, coach them into understanding the intentionality of life and how being authentic, which is a word in our industry that everybody uses,
Yeah.
has so much more value than the staging potential of life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of us, we live in a social media, again, not trying to talk too much about this, but it's kind of given us this idea of show your best. And that's what we see a lot of. But people are starving to see realness. And we talked about it before. I don't even know if it was during this episode before we started recording, but people are looking for something real to grab onto because people are starting to be able to see through this is just a polished version of their real life. People want to see what's real. And it was some of the best advice a coach gave me early on when I was launching my business. Someone was like, you know what, make sure that you show people who you really are. Don't go after this persona of being something that you're not. And like a couple of years ago, I still love wearing suits. I wear them to work every day because it's what I wear. But I wasn't gonna get on a podcast, I would have thrown on a suit and tie as well. But the truth is, that's not me. I'm a t-shirt guy, and like I'm quarantined, so I'm wearing sweatpants right now, like, and that's just really who I am. So it's me being more authentic instead of showing, okay, I'm a big business guy. I'm gonna throw on a suit and a tie. I'm gonna look real right for this interview. I'm gonna say all the right things. No, we're just letting it fly. This is who I am, and this is the authenticity that I want to give off to the world. And it's just something the world's missing right now, and people are searching for it more than ever. And I think that if you're somebody that can really do so properly and release it in the right way, like don't dump everything, I don't care like how bad your stomach hurt last night and stuff like that, like there's got to be like a line
Right.
of what you're going to share, but being authentic instead of trying to be something you're not is so much more valuable in today's world. It's missing so much right now.
So what do you do? Because it's something that has caused me to sometimes get out of focus and off course. Is when you're and like I talked about, I don't do the whose dick's bigger game anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I had to get my one story out there to the level where it needed to, and then I realized that that's not going to work. Like me just wanting to share my brother's story isn't enough to create the interest globally for me to be able to go speak about this all over the place. And that was a little defeating, but also relieving to know that I'm not willing to do the things that the template says I need to do in order to create that platform to be big enough. So in your world, do you get distracted, or do you find yourself sometimes looking at people that are doing the same thing you're doing or in the same space you're doing and go, I know for a fact that guy doesn't own a fucking Lamborghini, but there he is standing in front of it talking about his business coaching business. Like, that in your head, and you're like, but yet he's apparently making a lot of money because he's got all these, I only have 2 slots left. Like that whole at 49, 99, 95, like
Man.
you ever get yourself distracted by that?
It's easy to. I mean, full transparency here. Sometimes I'll see that stuff and you're like, I wish I was there, like just being real. But I have to remind myself, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, do for one what you wish you can do for all. I can only help one person right now. Like, honestly, I'm not at a level where thousands of people are lining up to hear me talk or anything like that. And that's okay. I'm going to do for one what I wish I can do for all. And then remember, I'm a person of value, not a person of profit. I've got to constantly be reminding myself of that. But yeah, sometimes seeing it, you're like, man, sometimes it's just like from a pure vanity standpoint, you're like, oh man, that'd be really cool. But like some of it isn't always true, but I don't ever compare myself to it is the thing I do. I'm not like, is it true? Is it not? It doesn't matter. It's just like, what? They're helping people do things in their lane. I'm gonna help people in mine. And the other thing I've been doing is really getting better at being a connector with people. Example, I had somebody listen to my podcast for a while and they really were struggling on one specific topic. And I knew another podcast host that actually they only covered that topic. And they're like, I don't have time to listen to another podcast. I'm like, do yourself a favor, unsubscribe from mine and subscribe to this one instead, because it's going to help you more right now. And they were like, really? I'm like, yeah, stop listening to this because it's not helping you. Go over here because it's going to help you more.
Right.
And, being that type of connector and that person of value versus like, no, stay with me. I'll cover it more, is so much more long term, I believe is going to leave that legacy that we're talking about. People are always going to remember, oh, Alex is the guy who connected me to that. That's not the reason I'm doing it, but it's always going to come back to you. I believe all good that you do comes back to you in some way, shape, or form. So going back to your question, I know I kind of rambled there a little bit, but really when I'm seeing these bigger names or these gurus, if you will, yeah, it can bother me at times, but I have to remind myself and step back and be like, no, that doesn't matter. That's not who I am. That's not where I am. I have to be okay with where I am today. So, and I can usually pretty quickly bring it back. It's sometimes that initial look can bother you a little bit though.
Yeah, and it's I agree 100%, and your answer was perfect, and it's what I was hoping you were going to say. And then sometimes I go back to my thug life persona where I just start wanting to nuke everything and call everybody out for staying where they are, and then I'm like, well, that's not going to help anybody. Like that's
Right.
counterproductive to my growth, my ability to be seen as somebody who's a leader and a steadfast persona in an oftentimes unsteady world. So I do bring myself back, but trust me when I tell you, I got my hand on the nuke switch more frequently than I like to admit when it comes to stuff like that. But
Right.
and at the end of the day, I think we both come from the same place, which is a place of caring and giving and servitude. Yep. And as long as you stay true to that, whether or not you become the greatest at your lane or I become the greatest in my lane, at the end of the day, that's really not the byproduct we're focusing on. Mm-hmm. To me, it's going to happen as it happens. Like my greatness will not be defined by a singular moment in time. It's going to be a connective chain of events that leads to my overall picture of my life, which is why I chose 2 Dates and a Dash as the title of my podcast, because your date you're born, the date you die, and the dash is what you do with your life. And ultimately that's as long of a period of time as God grants us. And we don't get to choose that for the most part. And for me, it's how do we fill that dash with as many amazing qualities and moments so that when it's done, hopefully there's 1,000 people in church saying they appreciated me as a person and
that's it, man. That's awesome.
Well, brother, I could do this all day long.
Me too.
And now that we neither of us have anywhere to be, we probably could.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate you. I'm going to put in the show, the show notes will be your website and all your social media links. I'll make sure when I do all the social media posts on the audio first and then the video later in the week, that it will contain all your website and all your social media stuff. And I know we will stay connected, and I truly do.
For sure.
Appreciate where you're coming from as a person, what you're doing with your gifts, and how you're sharing it with the world. So thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, Matt, happy birthday. And seriously, this was an honor. Thank you for having me today.
Awesome. Hang tight. Don't go anywhere. We'll talk offline. But everybody, thank you again for listening to this episode of the 2 Dates and a Dash podcast. If anybody wants to learn more about me, the book, the show, other episodes, my other podcast, Third Shift Chronicles, you can go to mattcubbler.com. Everything's there. And I truly do hope that through this nonsense known as quarantine from COVID-19, that you take a chance to reflect on your life, realize where you need to make some shifts in your focus and your attention, and live a intentional life of purpose and of servitude. So thank you. God bless, and go out and be kind to one another.